Good day, everybody. I'm back after taking a couple of weeks off. My brother was getting married, family was in town, and so there was a lot of activities, seeing people, going out for dinners, enjoying the beautiful weather. And I'm back, a little bit more energized, and I'm ready to get going. I had originally planned to release a video explaining a project of mine that I'm working on and very excited about, but the footage just wasn't good. It was overexposed, underexposed, clipping audio. Sometimes the autofocus was bouncing all over the place. To keep a long story short, I just hadn't practiced recording footage enough to have something worth editing together and releasing. So I've scrapped all that and I've decided to go with it for a new path. For context, about a couple of months ago, I bought a Sony FX30 to act as my primary camera. It's all kitted out with a shotgun mic, handles, all the fun stuff. And I've spent most of my time watching YouTube videos learning how to properly record S-Log3, grade it, editing, basically a video production crash course to replace my iPhone setup. So what am I working on this week? I've decided to pick up a project that is actually already code complete called Entropy. I had the idea recently of doing a artist self-portrait. Now, I code. I do not draw. I can take a photograph of myself, I guess, but that's not really all that exciting because I'm not a photographer either. What if I could take this entropy algorithm and modify it to redraw a photograph that a photographer has taken of me and use that as sort of a self-portrait? As you can see, it's made up of a bunch of different sizes of fragments throughout the artwork. There's large blocks, and then on top of them there's progressively lighter blocks. Let me show you real quick what that looks like. So for this sample, this is made up of 7 layers. It starts off in the very back as very dark, large blocks. Now, I've just used cheap print quality for this just for illustrative purposes, but in reality that would be almost black, the entire image. And then it starts to evaluate layer by layer and starts filling in. And so this would be imposed on top of that layer, a little bit lighter, more fragmented. Repeat the process, a little bit lighter, more fragmented, and so forth, adding layer on top of layer until you get into the lighter, more bright, saturated ranges. And that's kind of how each of the artworks are composed. So what I'm thinking for a self-portrait is that I will take a photo of my face and map it using a depth map from farthest to closest to camera, from that layer all the way to that. Let me draw you a quick example. Each of the artworks has a random number of layers, but I think for this project I'll probably just go with 8. So 0 to 7. And so 0 is going to represent far, which, as we already know, is the back layer, which is dark and large segments. And then 7 will represent near, which is light and small. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a photograph of myself and I'm going to run it through a depth map process, which will basically spit out an image that shows what is furthest from camera to closest. So in this case, it'll be something like, excuse the suggestive silhouette there. Something like that, and then let's use purple to represent the next closest. Something kind of like that. It'd probably be like around the head. And then eventually, in the actual map, it would be white, but something like that. You get the idea. It creates a depth map. Then from there, I'll quantize it into its own array, yada, 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 8 of them. So it'll basically be a map telling each of these layers where they need to draw. Currently, it evaluates each layer on top of each other using different brightness values and things like that. So I'm going to insert this data into that layer and see if I can get something kind of resembling a portrait. Now I may also try to do some sort of like feature detection. Things like maybe I'll be able to detect lines, like edge detection, and then be able to feed that into maybe some of the layers or manipulate the data or something like that. I'm not entirely sure until I get into it, but the rough idea is to go from a depth map into the algorithm and see if I can override some of the randomization process and kind of guide it to tell it where I want these elements to be. Okay, it's Tuesday evening now, and I've spent a day experimenting, seeing what kind of open source solutions are out there for getting depth estimation. I ended up taking it a little bit farther with some other things that I'll show you in just a second. What I learned was that there's a lot of different models out there, thankfully a lot of open source models. Some do different things better than others, and I ended up picking one, I forget the name of it, but it'll be in the description if you're curious, that basically just works really fast. I didn't need high levels of detail, I just needed like the rough contours to be there to be able to start this project. So let me show you what I've done so far. So there's my beautiful face. That's the photo I'm going to be using for my self-portrait. It was done in a professional photo studio, so that's why I'm looking quite dapper. And this is the depth map. It actually looks pretty good. One thing I did notice is because it doesn't really know what's going on in the background, there's a bit of a gradient. I'm not really worried about that. As well, the blackest black is down here next to my cheek. I don't know if you can see the mouse. And the whitest white is here on the tip of my nose, which makes sense, but they're actually quite far away from pure black and pure white. So I think I'll probably do some sort of process, basically just do some levels adjustments, and I might need to change the midpoint depending on how it ends up working in the algorithm tomorrow. But I didn't just do depth, I also found this cool tool by Cool Tool. That's a fun thing to say. Google released this thing, usually it's used in real time, but you can use it to detect different features like the eyes and lips. I figured that might come in handy. I'm not sure yet, but I figured at the very least I could take those, blur them a little bit, and try to guide the algorithm to make those features a little bit more prominent. And finally, I thought, well, why not have some lines? I don't think my algorithm renders anything to that level of high frequency detail, but it was just a few lines of code, so I figured why not just throw it in. This kind of feels like a reality TV setup where I'm just like giving a little bit of a confessional to you while the drama's happening in background. So I did not complete anywhere near as much as I thought I would in this first week. And then my partner, she's working on a video production series for a book that she's released on Canadian finance. So I'm helping produce this video series for her. And you know, if you can see over there, I've got got some bounce light, boom mic, camera set up with a teleprompter, rim light back there. Basically, I was spending a day figuring out what a good way to record a talking head format would be in with a semi-professional background. You know, basically we've just got some little knickknacks and her book to my left shoulder. I'll put a link in the description in case you happen to be Canadian and want to learn a little bit more about personal finance. You can get it on Amazon. And yeah, you know, we live in a one-bedroom apartment, so can't leave this set up all the time. We're gonna leave this up for a couple of days while we record 3 or 4 videos just to kind of get a bulk of them going before we release them. And this is mostly for me to learn how to set up different environments, how to, you know, record on the fly, do a more professional setup like this if I want to do talking head style communications with you. I'm going to get back to working on the artwork that I was mentioning earlier, and hopefully I'll have an update for you at the end of the day. I got the images loaded in, so I'm excited to, you know, get some really rough little portrait going. Okay, I didn't end up recording myself at the end of the day, like I said in my last clip, but I spent some time over the weekend generating a bunch of outputs, picking out a few that I liked and queuing them up. Well, not queuing them, just manually setting them up on my computer to render out at high quality, just to make sure that things were working, and I'm happy to share they are. Here's some examples. Let me get up close here for you, show some of the details. So this ended up working really well. I'm using the depth mask basically to control a bit of the dark in the background to the light in the foreground, but I also decided to mix it with the original photo turned grayscale so that I could kind of have an approximation for the lighting and use that to guide some of the way the signed distance field functions in the background are working. Well, not so much the functions, it's more of actually just domain warping. So like here, if we go look at the collar, there we go, it's in focus. You can see how it kind of, like as it gets closer to camera at the top of the ridge, it sort of warps and curves along with the flow of the gradient. And same thing on the left side of my face. I use the lighting information to sort of add to the depth map to do some of that distortion while leaving over here on the right side, the darker side of my face, more blocky, whereas the left clearly has a nice flow to it. I thought it kind of created an interesting mix. Like if I were actually painting this with paint, that would be kind of an interesting technique to create the form while creating some contrast between light and dark. Additionally, the background is much more blocky than the foreground. Some of the pinstripes in my jacket came out through the edge detection, and the masks I use for my eyes and mouth are kind of chiseling away and making it a little bit more clear. Like I also did a couple different masks where it's quantized to different resolutions. Some of them are quantized to just 4 layers, whereas others are 8, to bring out more details or create more blockiness. So there's quite a lot going on under the hood, but it seems to work pretty well. And when I ran the algorithm, I picked out a few to render in high quality, so I'll just show you them now. This one was a little bit more wild in terms of the color and the spread of the information. Like my eyes look absolutely crazy in it, but I thought this one was pretty cool. This one here is a lot more clean. You can see sort of more what I was actually shaping in the background because the forms that kind of got generated by this one were much larger and blockier. A lot of the generations, which I'm not going to show you here on the forehead, ended up having this weird circle that kind of creates this third eye thing. It's not what I'm going for, but kind of an interesting artifact of the depth map resulting the way it is. And this one I absolutely love. It's the most chaotic and kind of crazy. That's kind of the style of art that I really like creating. So I hope when I actually do a final curation of this set, I can find a bunch like this and be able to pick one out that really kind of feels like a representation of who and what my creativity is all about. So it's a couple days later. I went out cycling yesterday because one of my goals for this summer is to get out and enjoy myself as much as possible. But I made the mistake of going out at the hottest time of day during what I think is the hottest day of the summer so far. And the rest of the day I spent here on the couch drinking fluids and sitting in the AC. So this morning I basically did a bunch of file copying and I wanted to go out and do some stuff, but I'm hiding from the sun. So the good news is that a bunch of stuff has rendered and now I can start curating. So let me show you. So basically, I have a big folder of all the different renders of my face. And the way I curate is I go through this folder, there's 1,000 in here, and basically I just delete the ones that aren't good. So this one I would say is probably good. This one I don't really like because it's got this weird thing on my forehead. So I just delete, it's gone. I'll go through it, do that quick pass, and then I'll go through and be a little bit more picky about, okay, is this something that I actually want to spend an hour rendering a high quality version of or not? And kind of just narrow it down. Now, I kind of want to narrow it down to 1, so I'm not sure, I've never done that before, but that's what I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to go through real quick, just delete, 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 kind of gut reaction, and I'll pick one out and render out a high quality version and try to get it printed and see what it looks like. Okay, I just did a quick curation and I boiled the 1,000 down to about 130 or so. I might do another quick pass through, but I'm going to show you some of the ones I picked out. I didn't select everything that I would actually want because there was some that were just so bizarre. I need to see what they look like in high resolution. So this one's like an okay one. Let me see if I can find a crazy one. I mean, they're all kind of crazy. Oh yeah, like that one. I would never actually want it, but it's got a bizarre sort of inverted look that I want to see what it looks like when it's fully rendered. Anyways, I'm going to queue those up to render. I might render out another 1,000 or so just to curate later. I'll be back when I can select about 2 or 3 that I'm going to post-process by hand and test print and see what they look like. Okay, I've definitely underestimated how long it's going to take to render. Looks like it's going to take all weekend to render the 100 or so that I've shortlisted. So today I've decided to grab 4 that have finished so far and print them out at 5x7 just to see what they look like. I picked up a couple small frames at the dollar store just to have a portrait of myself and a portrait of my partner once I do make a final selection. And I kind of want to just see, do they look good small? The renders are actually for these size, which are, off the top of my head, I can't actually remember, it was 16 by 22, something like that. But I think they'll look pretty good, small. So let's do a test. It always helps to see things printed out. I, for some reason, didn't notice in the digital one that it had this big bright spot. That's very distracting, so I think I'm gonna just reject that one. I like this one because it's very creative. I'm gonna throw that in the frame, probably throw all 3 of those in the frame and see what it looks like. Funny enough, I actually forgot to account for the matte, but it just kind of barely works out. I prefer to see this little, like, this broken edge, but that's okay. This will work out just fine for a little test. And once I have a final selection, once it's all rendered next week, I'll be a little more careful with planning out the prints. Okay, initial impressions. I like both of these. They work well. This abstract one is interesting. At a distance, it kind of makes me want to get closer to look at it and then see, oh, that's really cool. That's a portrait made of kind of different blobs. It's very abstract. But on the other hand, I really like the fine-grained details of this, because that's kind of the type of details I like to have in my art. So I think maybe when I'm curating, I'm gonna try to find one that's maybe a little bit of both. Now I'm kind of wondering if even printing at a larger resolution like that is wise or not. I don't really want to waste the ink on a large print if these small portraits work well. Maybe I'll try an in-between. Maybe I'll try like an 8x10. I've got an 8x10 frame over there. I could just swap and throw a portrait in just to test, but I'm gonna let it render over the weekend, and in the next video I'll select one of the artworks and kind of polish it up and finish it.